Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. What happens when someone who has been pushed too far finally snaps? And the entire street witnesses it. Because in Weatherfield, one explosive moment between Todd and Theo just changed everything. On the cobbled streets of Weatherfield, emotions finally boil over in a dramatic confrontation between Todd Grimshaw and Theo. After weeks of insults, manipulation, and psychological pressure, Todd reaches his breaking point. What begins as a heated argument quickly spirals into a shocking physical clash that leaves residents stunned and the entire community divided. Life on the streets of Weatherfield has never been calm, but lately the tension hanging over the neighborhood has felt especially heavy. Secrets, grudges, and personal rivalries always seem to bubble beneath the surface there, and it rarely takes much for everything to erupt into chaos. This time, the storm centers around Todd Grimshaw, a man known for his sharp tongue, clever mind, and often complicated choices for years. Todd has navigated conflicts with sarcasm, strategy, and manipulation, rather than brute force. But even the most calculating person has a breaking point, and lately, Theo has been pushing Todd closer and closer to it. What started as a simple rivalry gradually twisted into something far more toxic. Theo's behavior toward Todd had been relentless. The taunts, the mind games, the smug little comments that always seemed designed to humiliate Todd in front of others. It all began piling up. Every interaction felt like another small cut, and over time those cuts turned into something much deeper. Theo seemed to take pleasure in it, constantly poking and prodding, enjoying the psychological power he had over Todd. For weeks, Todd tried to keep control. He relied on his usual defense mechanisms, sarcasm, biting remarks, and clever verbal jabs. But the truth was that every insult from Theo was building pressure beneath the surface. The anger never really disappeared. It just sat there, simmering quietly. And then came the night when everything finally exploded. The atmosphere across Witherfield already felt tense before Todd even approached Theo. People on the street could sense that something wasn't quite right. There was an edge in the air, that uncomfortable feeling that something dramatic was about to happen. Todd, clearly fed up after enduring what felt like endless humiliation, finally confronted Theo face to face. This wasn't going to be another sarcastic exchange or a quick argument. Todd had reached the point where he simply couldn't stay silent anymore. Theo, however, didn't show the slightest hint of backing down. If anything, he looked amused. That familiar smug expression spread across his face, the same one that had irritated Todd so many times before. Instead of diffusing the situation, Theo leaned into it. His attitude only made things worse. The two men began trading harsh accusations almost immediately. Todd didn't hold anything back. He openly accused Theo of being manipulative, of deliberately destroying lives, and of taking twisted satisfaction in pushing people to their emotional limits. All the frustration Todd had been holding inside suddenly poured out, but Theo refused to accept any blame. Instead, he fired back with his own cruel remarks. In his view, Todd had nobody to blame but himself. He dismissed Todd as weak, claiming that Todd had created his own problems and was now trying to blame someone else for them. Their voices grew louder and louder, echoing across the cobbled street. Residents nearby started to notice people slowed down, watching from doorways or windows, sensing that this argument was becoming something serious. Before anyone could step in to calm things down, the situation suddenly crossed a line. Todd's carefully controlled anger finally snapped. In a moment that shocked even him, Todd lunged forward and grabbed Theo, slamming him hard against a nearby wall. Months of pent-up frustration erupted all at once. The sharp sound of the impact echoed across the street, freezing everyone nearby in disbelief. This wasn't the calm, calculating Todd people were used to seeing. This was something completely different. Theo tried to push back and defend himself, But Todd was relentless. All the bottled up emotion, anger, betrayal, humiliation, heartbreak fueled every movement. He demanded answers from Theo, demanding accountability for everything that had happened between them. People nearby stared in horror as the confrontation became physical. Someone shouted for them to stop, but the voices around them seemed distant compared to the storm raging between the two men. For Todd, this moment was about more than just a single argument. It was about finally taking back control after feeling powerless for so long. Every cruel comment Theo had made, every humiliating moment, every manipulative move, all of it came crashing down in that instant. Theo, even while struggling, couldn't resist taunting Todd. He warned him that he would regret this moment forever. But those words only fueled Todd's rage even more. The fight became increasingly brutal as Todd refused to let go of the fury that had taken hold of him. For a brief moment, the entire balance of power between them flipped. Theo, who had spent weeks emotionally tormenting Todd, suddenly found himself completely overpowered. Eventually, more residents rushed over and managed to intervene. Several people grabbed Todd and pulled him away, breaking the haze of anger that had consumed him. Theo collapsed to the ground, bruised, shocked, and clearly not expecting things to end this way. The silence that followed was almost louder than the fight itself. Todd stood there breathing heavily, staring at Theo as reality began to sink in. The crowd around them looked stunned. The man they had known as witty and manipulative had just revealed a completely different side of himself. Theo slowly gathered himself, but the confidence that usually defined him had vanished. For the first time, he genuinely looked shaken. Naturally, the story spread across Weatherfield almost instantly. Within minutes, everyone seemed to be talking about what they had just witnessed. As always, opinions quickly split down the middle. Some residents were horrified that Todd had resorted to violence. To them, it crossed a line that should never be crossed. Others quietly admitted that Theo might have finally faced the consequences of his behavior. They believed Todd had simply been pushed beyond endurance. The incident forced the entire community to confront uncomfortable truths about both men. Todd now had to deal with the fallout of losing control. Friends worried that the emotional strain caused by Theo's relentless manipulation had finally broken him. Theo, however, refused to admit defeat. Instead, he insisted the fight only proved what he had been saying all along, that Todd was unstable and dangerous. As the dust settled, that kind of psychological pressure, others argued that violence is never the answer, no matter how badly someone has been provoked. Todd himself struggled with what had happened. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a heavy sense of guilt. He knew he had crossed a line that couldn't easily be undone. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of release. For the first time, he had stood up to the man who had tormented him for so long. Theo, meanwhile, wasn't ready to let things end there. Being overpowered in front of the entire street had damaged his pride deeply. And humiliation like that doesn't just disappear. If anything, it made him more determined than ever to get revenge as tension continued to simmer across Weatherfield. One thing became clear: that explosive confrontation had changed everything. The emotional scars of that moment would linger long after the physical bruises faded. The real impact of this moment goes far beyond a single fight. What happened between Todd and Theo essentially split the entire community into opposing sides. Trust is shaken, friendships are strained, and people are beginning to question everything they thought they knew about both men. Todd's outburst damaged his reputation in a way that clever words and schemes never could. Even those who sympathize with him now see a darker, more volatile side of his personality. Meanwhile, Theo has cleverly begun framing himself as the victim, using Todd's violent reaction to strengthen his narrative that Todd is unstable. But at the same time, many residents recognize that Theo's constant psychological pressure helped create this situation. That raises a difficult question for everyone watching. When someone is pushed and provoked again and again, who truly carries the blame when they finally snap? And perhaps most importantly, This confrontation feels less like the end of their feud and more like the beginning of something even bigger. Theo's thirst for revenge combined with Todd's guilt could easily ignite another round of conflict. Personally, I think this storyline is incredibly powerful because it shows how complicated human reactions really are. Todd's behavior was definitely shocking, and violence is never something that should be celebrated. But at the same time, you can't ignore how much emotional pressure Theo had been applying. Watching someone be pushed over and over again until they finally break is uncomfortable, but it's also very real. People have limits, and Todd clearly reached his. What makes this situation even more interesting is that neither man is completely innocent. Todd lost control, but Theo's constant manipulation helped create the explosion. That grey area is exactly what makes this conflict so gripping to watch. In the end, that brutal clash between Todd and Theo didn't just shake Weatherfield for one night. It completely changed the dynamic of the entire street. Friendships are strained, loyalties are shifting, and both men are now trapped dealing with the consequences of that explosive moment. And the biggest question now is whether this fight was the end of their feud or just the start of something even more dangerous. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think Todd was justified after everything Theo put him through? Or did he cross a line that can be defended? And what do you think Theo's next move will be? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the biggest drama happening on the Cobbles.